question about cacao. I think it was about chocolate or cacao, the effect of cacao on the gut. The biggest thing that you have to be concerned about there is caffeine. Caffeine can be a gastric irritant. If you already have GI damage, a lot of people don't realize this is why they keep drinking their tea or their coffee. If their gut's already damaged, they oftentimes struggle to repair or recover. And the reason why is the caffeine. And so we get most of that from either chocolate, coffee, or tea, or diet products. A lot of your diet products contain green coffee extract or guarana seed extract or some form of plant that is very rich in caffeine. And so that caffeine, again, can be a gastric irritant and continue to damage. So that's what you would have to worry about with cacao, potentially. Let's see here. I like this. Filene's asking, when going keto and burning fat, are excess toxins being eliminated? Yes. Excess toxins are being eliminated if you've got a lot of fat in a history of illness. We actually give that a name, Filene. It's called angry fat. Okay? Angry fat is fat. Remember what your fat is. Your fat's a storage facility. So if you've lived a lot of years where you've made some bad decisions with your food, with your diet, been exposed to a number of poisons or toxins through your choices and behaviors, your body, one of the ways your body tries to get rid of those toxins is by storing it away in your fat, especially those toxins that can create oxidation. So when you go keto or when you go on a diet with caloric restriction and exercise and you start burning into your fat stores, you're breaking that fat open, and many of those toxins that were being stored are now being released into your bloodstream, and now your liver, your kidneys, your skin, your GI tract has to deal with those things. And so again, it just depends on how much of that you've got stored in you. But I've seen cases where people have pretty severe response, now, especially in the obese. The very inflamed obese individuals will have pretty bad angry fat reactions overall. Angeline asking if I help people with schizophrenia. Yeah, it is, and it isn't off topic, and I'll tell you why, Angeline. Schizophrenia is a major one that starts in the gut. Somebody asked, I saw in the feed earlier, somebody was asking about water fasting and recovery of schizophrenia. And, that it's not that the water fasting cures the schizophrenia. Remember what water fasting does. Water fasting removes the food, right? And if food is the trigger for the schizoaffective disorder, then you've now removed the trigger. And this is where water fasting, we see the same thing in other autoimmune conditions where fasting, 48-hour fasting, leads to dramatic improvement overall in symptoms. So then it just becomes an issue of reverse engineering what to remove, because you can't drink water forever and not eat food. You'll starve to death. But to answer your question, do I help folks with schizophrenia? Yes. Actually, one of my very first patients was a young man. They actually, they thought he was going to try to kill himself. It was a very tragic case until, his mom brought him into my office. But he was so far gone. He had actually made an attempt a couple of different times at suicide. And for this young man, it was a combination for him. It was gluten, but it was also dairy. He would actually sleepwalk. Interesting story. This young man would sleepwalk into the kitchen at night, open the refrigerator, and drink buttermilk whole. And his mom would find empty cartons of buttermilk in the refrigerator the next day. But when we figured out he was allergic to dairy and sensitive to gluten, and we made those dietary changes, he regained his clarity of thinking. He was on multiple medications, including things like Abilify and Seroquel, which are very powerful antipsychotic medications. We were able to wean him off of those things and make a full recovery just by altering his diet. That's the power of diet change. Don't ever let a doctor tell you nutrition's not important. It's the most important. So a couple of you asking about schizophrenia tonight. Elizabeth asked about it, Macedo asked about it, Angeline asked about it, so hopefully that's helpful for all of you. Sutania wants to know, is organic butter okay to eat on a gluten-free diet? I don't recommend it unless you can verify the source of the dairy. Remember that one thing that hasn't been adequately studied that needs to be studied Maybe one of these days when I retire from clinical practice, we'll do a research study on it, but hopefully somebody else will do it before then. We don't know whether the gluten or the grain product, the gliadin and the other glutens from grains pass into the milk of cows. We know it does in humans. So like in humans, if a mother eats gluten, then the gluten proteins actually show up in her breast milk. So if she's breastfeeding and the baby's gluten sensitive, the baby could have gluten reactions. So in those cases, we recommend we don't recommend not to breastfeed. We recommend for the mother to go on a gluten-free diet. But the cows themselves, if you can't verify, what the cows are being fed appropriately, then the risk really with dairy is that nobody's really adequately studied whether or not gluten can pass through into the dairy of cows. Aside from the fact that many of the cows today, the type of dairy they produce or the type of protein in their dairy is a known trigger for multiple forms of autoimmunity, and I'm referring to A1 casein as the type of dairy in most commercial dairy cows. Let's see here. Can severe stenosis in the cranial arteries be reversed? Depends on what causing it. There are a number of reasons why stenosis can occur, and I would say the first part of your question is to identify the triggering component of the stenosis. Is it a calcium plaque or an arterial plaquing? Is it stenotic because the vessels are in spasm? And I've seen both cases, where somebody maybe was calcium magnesium deficient. They were prone, their blood vessels, their arteries were prone to vasospasm, and so they had stenosis, which just means narrowing. And I've seen cases where plaquing, arterial plaquing due to years of inflammation was contributing to that. So it just depends on what's contributing to it and how bad it actually is. So Joni, my son has colitis. He's seeing an MD. He's pretty picky eater, but trying to get better. Any advice and supplements? Yeah, I have a formula for people that actually have colitis, so I have several different formulas, but one of the ones I have is called GI Soothe, SOOTHE, and what it has some mucilaginous plant-based agents in it that help basically with colitis. The intestinal lining of the large intestine is very, very raw. And so just the act of eating in and of itself can create inflammation because the skin, if you will, think of the internal essence of the GI tract as a skin, so to speak. It's very raw and very inflamed, and so anything can irritate it. This is why fasting can work so well, short-term fasting or controlled fasting in colitis. But GI Soothe is a mucilaginous, so it can help coat and line that area and try to help reduce some of that angriness that's there. So Dahlia, kind of similar question. I have a flare of ulcerative colitis. Once it's started, how do I stop a flare? The first thing you do is you fast. You really got to get a good grip on fasting. 24 to 48 hour fast will help get that under control really, really quickly. Beyond that, you really need to work with a doctor, because it depends on why you had the flare. And that, again, going back to what I have said over and over and over again, identify the trigger, remove the trigger. Something caused the flare. It didn't just happen in a vacuum. You did something that triggered that flare. So what was it? Another question, is there an alternative to NSAIDs for taking for relief of pain post-surgically after bunion surgery? We use something called white willow complex. It's a formulation that I have that can be used as a safer substitute. The other thing you can do is you can combine vitamin C, about 5 grams, with quercetin, and I have a formula called Ultra Q that we use very frequently in people. We combine, again, about 5 grams of C with about 4 grams of Ultra Q, and that can work really, really well to support that. What to do for severe constipation when a female goes to the bathroom only once a month when she has her period. So that's pretty severe. There's not a magic bullet for that. I mean, I do have a product that can help with bowel movements. It's called GI Restore, but it's not something I recommend that you take on a daily basis. It's more for that that overcoming that severe bout of constipation, but not to take on a daily basis to have a regular bowel movement. You've got to figure out, Angeline, why that's happening. That's again, the real kicker. There's a reason why your bowels are not, the muscles in your bowels are not peristalsing properly to push that food through you. What about food combining? Somebody's asking about food combining, like combining protein and starch or fat and protein. Generally speaking, some people do struggle when they try to combine fruit with meat. And that's most of the time, it's not in regular healthy people, but it's in people with compromised GI tracts. And so that's an area where if you're looking at multiple foods, sometimes one of the best things to do is to eat predominantly one substrate of macronutrients. So like only eat carbohydrate in that sitting, or only eat, meat per se, or protein in that sitting, or only eat fat, or predominantly. It's impossible to only eat one of those things, but predominantly, because most real foods have kind of a mixture of carbs, fats, and proteins. But you can select things that are, higher in carbohydrate, for example, lower in protein, or higher in fat but lower in protein, or higher in protein without any carbohydrate, etc. Let's see here. IV infusions with vitamins and minerals. Some now offer IV vitamin and mineral as well as glutathione, zinc, vitamin C, and these are going straight into the bloodstream, avoiding absorption problems in the GI. Yeah, so number one problem with IV. IV is great if you can tolerate it. Where IV fails, in my opinion, is IV can be a source of corn. A lot of times your IV bags are GMO corn, and they just don't tell you, and you don't know, and you're getting that direct into your bloodstream. Not good. Now, if that's not the case, let's say that you're not getting that. The IV, generally, what you're doing is especially if we're talking about water-soluble vitamins. So these are vitamins like your Bs, so B vitamins and vitamin C. They have a very short half-life. And so an IV, you have to understand, an IV is only going to be good for 1 to 2 days. And then everything you had IV'd in you is going to go out your kidney, out through your urine, predominantly sweat, urine. So you get 1 to 2 days. So an IV, if you have a plan where you're working with a doctor and they're saying, okay, look, let's do an IV twice a week for the next month to support your nutrition as we clean up your diet and get your gut working again, this can be valuable. IV can be valuable. But if you're trying to solve your vitamin and mineral deficiencies by IVing and bypassing your broken gut, you're going to be sorely disappointed, and you're going to go broke pretty quick, because IV nutrition can get expensive, especially if you do it right. And you don't want to have to rely on it in order to feel well. You want to be able to rely on food. At the end of the day, your goal should be eat the right diet, eat the right foods, get the right nutrients, because your gut functions and works, doesn't leak, and doesn't create a systemic inflammatory problem. So hopefully that helps give you a little light on the IV components. Again, it can be a powerful tool, but it shouldn't be the only tool that you're anticipating trying to get you to get better. I've seen people, they come to me from all over the world, people do, and their prior doctors were just doing IV. There was no strategy. There was no long-term game plan. It was just, let's IV you and you'll feel better. Well, that doesn't fix why the problem is there. That's what we call, when you give vitamins, or any herbals, or really anything that's natural, when you give natural remedies, okay? Natural remedies to treat symptoms, it's what we call green medicine. Green medicine is no good. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't use natural remedies from time to time to treat symptoms that are discomforting, but true medicine, true functional medicine, is find out why. Ask that question. Why are the symptoms there? If you're not asking that question, you're using green medicine mask that. And so that's what I call, boil it down, it's called pseudo-compassion, false compassion. You know, when a doctor wants to help you, they're trying to be compassionate about how you're feeling. But if they don't ask the right questions, it's not true compassion. True compassion is asking the tough questions. It's asking the hard questions and getting serious answers. And sometimes that means answers you don't want to hear. Many of you don't want to change your diet. Many of you don't want to eat right or exercise or go to bed on time or, you know, or do the things that is required to restore your health. And many of you do, right? I don't want to, you know, create a damning accusation for those of you watching. You're obviously here because you're trying to learn, but I want you to learn it right. You know, don't seek the short-term benefit in lieu of ascertaining the long-term change that needs to be made to give you true compassion and true health. Okay, let's see, scroll down on the right there. I don't understand your question, Rajendra. Who are good candidates for my warrior bread? Anybody who wants to have a grain-free bread option. If you are wanting a grain-free bread that won't wreck you, if you're gluten sensitive, you're a candidate for warrior bread. Shinquillo, is it wild rice, black rice, or both that are safe if avoiding gluten? It's wild rice. Black rice, not okay. Wild rice specifically. How do you figure out the best probiotic or prebiotic to take? Go down just a little bit more. The question's being cut off. To take and digest. How do you figure out which one's the best? I'm a little biased in this case. I think my products are the best. We formulate them to be free of contaminants, garbage, GMOs, and other things. And you know, it's the same products that we carry at Gluten Free Society are the same ones that I use in my clinical practice. And so in that regard, you know, if it's good enough for my patients, it's probably good enough for you. And so that's where I tend to lean toward bias. That's how you find the best, is you go to glutenfreesociety.org and check out our supplement store. Gwendolyn, my dad has low blood pressure. He is a dialysis patient with multiple myeloma. He suffers from constipation. Stool softeners give him diarrhea. Should I be avoiding certain foods? I mean, with that kind of a problem, yeah, there's probably a lot of things he should be avoiding. You know, your dad needs testing. He's in too dire of a strait. If he's doing dialysis and he's been diagnosed with that severity of a condition, then he needs, you know, not just generic advice or guidelines. I mean, he could, you know, if you want to just do anything with him right now, immediately, you could get a copy of my book and go follow phase 2 of the no grain, no pain diet. But that's just strictly, that's guessing at it. You know, with his situation, it sounds like it's a lot more complicated, and you might want to get testing done to get much more specific. Digestive enzymes, do they help with leaky gut? They can be a strategy to help a person overcome leaky gut, but by themselves, in and of themselves, are not going to repair a leaky gut. Let's see here. Is schizophrenia an autoimmune disease? Boy, the schizophrenic questions keep coming in. Yes, there's a lot of evidence that shows that schizophrenia is an autoimmune process. Is going into a carnivore diet the best way to heal IBS? No, not necessarily. Carnivore is very helpful for some people, but in my opinion, it's not a long-term strategy. Carnivore, you know, you can stay on it, and for many people, they feel a lot better initially, but if you stay on it for prolonged periods of time, you can actually create additional imbalance issues in your overall nutrition. So if you're going to be carnivore, if you're considering going carnivore, my advice would be just get with a good functional doctor who can measure your nutritional status periodically, just to make sure you're not derailing your nutritional levels. Can leaky gut cause itching of the skin? Yes, it can. It absolutely can. Is there a connection between the gut and tinnitus? There can be, depending on the type of tinnitus. There are different forms of tinnitus, but some of them are damage to the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is the nerve that feeds your inner ear mechanism. And so when we see, sometimes we'll see people with gut damage where that is the case. And I've seen cases where tinnitus goes away when we deal with their gut issues. And I've seen cases where tinnitus doesn't go away. So it just depends on, again, the root cause of yours specifically. Let's see, go down on the right there. Somebody's asking about our ultra hemp. It's good for both. Somebody's asking about leaky gut. Look, here's the real issue is hemp and CBD are not going to cure the gut. Not going to cure it. They're going to activate certain receptors that help to modulate inflammation, but they're not going to cure the why. But a lot of people will use hemp or CBD, as a symptomatic relief. This goes back to this. What you're doing is green medicine. You've got to find the trigger. You've got to find the origin. Hemp can be a great thing if you're struggling really bad, but ultimately don't just, find hemp or CBD and then give up trying to find why. You got to go back to the why. Sheila wants to know how to increase your stomach acid if you have low amounts of it. Depends on why it's low. If it's damage to your parietal cells, then you've got to support your stomach. You've got to support your body's ability to heal that damage. If it's that you have naturally lower stomach acid, for some people it's a matter of being, especially if you're blood type A, it's a matter of being kind of closer to a pesco-vegetarian diet where you're eating a lot less meat, or because meat is what creates the burden. Meat creates a digestive burden if your stomach acid's not being produced in adequate quantities. For some people, stomach acid issues are because there's an infection in the stomach or there's a problem in the stomach directly. So I help, getting with the doctor to get those things identified can all be helpful. Some people find that, using, I mentioned ultra acid earlier as a supplement. Some people also find apple cider vinegar before a meal as helpful to kind of put a little bit of mild acid on the stomach to help to digest. Okay, go down on both sides here. Let's see, I used to be on B12 sublingual. Is it better to take one that melts under your tongue as opposed to just swallowing the pill? Yes, it is especially if you have a history of gluten-induced GI damage. The areas that B12 is absorbed, you need healthy stomach cells. You also need, B12 is absorbed in a part of your small intestine that's typically damaged by gluten. And so a lot of people with a history of gluten sensitivity struggle to properly absorb B12 in their GI tract, even though they're on a gluten-free diet. And this is where a sublingual that absorbs through the cheeks and the buccal mucosa can be very effective. We produce one, actually, to my knowledge, I'm the only company in the world that produces a corn-free B12. Most of them have corn in them. That's what they use. The different sweeteners that they use, the different flavoring agents that they use are predominantly corn. So you've got to be real careful. If you're looking for one that doesn't have all that nonsense, check out methylcobalamin. That's methyl, M-E-T-H-Y-L, methylcobalamin. Donald's asking about how serious are probiotic side effects when your immunity is low. Most probiotics come with that warning. I've never seen anybody with low immunity react poorly to a probiotic. Where we'll see people react to a probiotic, generally speaking, is if they have something like a pre-existing bacterial overgrowth in the GI tract, and the probiotic might create a lot of gas or bloating for that individual. Additionally, we'll sometimes see people that don't do well with certain strains of probiotic, but do better with spore-based probiotics. They don't tend to cause some of the GI symptoms. We have different varieties and different options, but one of our premier probiotics is called Ultrabiotic Defense. One of our spore probiotics is called Biotic Force. But I wouldn't, if you've got low immunity, I wouldn't worry so much about taking a probiotic per se. They're safe. They're safe regardless. I haven't seen anybody with an immunosuppression disease have a hard time tolerating a good probiotic. Let's see here. Oh, back up just a little bit. Is it safe to use sodium citrate? I mean, generally there's no problem. I would say if you're, sodium citrate in what regard? If you're talking about just sodium as a sodium salt with citrate attached to it as a binder, what's the source of the sodium would be my question. If we're talking about true sodium, are we talking about monosodium glutamate? Are we talking about like a sea salt? Or are you talking about like an added ingredient in a supplement? It's hard to answer that question without specificity. Locust bean gum and gelling gum, are those okay? Gelling gum is generally pretty safe and benign. Locust bean gum can be very challenging to digest, and that's really one of the core problems with gums, is they can be challenging to digest. Remember, they're gums. They don't break down very easy, and if your gut is already compromised, if your GI tract is compromised and struggling already with digestion, then an abundance of gums coming through the diet might not be the best idea, at least not initially. Let's see here. Same thing with acacia gum. Same thing with any gum, guys. If you're talking about gums, really the two taboo gums, the ones that I would tell you to steer clear of is, if you're talking about for ingestion, is one is xanthan gum and the other is carrageenan gum. Carrageenan gum has been shown in a number of studies to cause gastrointestinal inflammation, so that's one I would just recommend that you steer clear of. Scroll down just a little bit here. There we go. Not sure I understand your question, Chucho. If you're eating all of your food in an 8-hour window, you should not have food in your gut when you go to eat again 16 hours later. The normal gut transit time is about 10 to 12 hours. If it's taken you longer than that to pass a movement, you got something else going on that needs to be looked at and addressed. How long after beginning good bacterial supplementation do most start to see a positive effect or changes to mood? That's a big question, Melanie, because it's not like a specific time frame. It depends on why the mood is disrupted. And there are a lot of reasons why. So, I mean, you could be taking a great probiotic, but if the probiotic is not related to why you're struggling with a mood problem, then it's not really you're not gonna see any change. So it depends on what is creating the mood dysphoria or the mood issue. Okay, keep going down there. What words of advice would you give a parent with a 10-year-old child with 2 pancreatitis hospitalizations? It's beyond advice at this point, Esther. It's no longer words of advice for your 10-year-old child. It's now, you do as I say, this is my house and I'm your parent and I brought you into this world. That's the word of advice I would give to you, is you really got to lock down the diet. There is no deviation. With pancreatitis hospitalizations, I mean, you're talking about the potential of life and death. Pancreatitis is a very, very acute, very, very dangerous, very, very life-threatening condition. So if your son is already on board, if the child is already, I say son, I don't know if it's son or a daughter, but if they're already on board with diet change and everything else, then the advice I would give you as a parent is less advice for the child and more advice for the parent. Seek out functional help. You've got to figure out why that's happening. And until you figure out what the trigger is, you're going to run the risk of future hospitalizations and potential danger. That's what I would say, more than I would give advice to the child. I don't know, Wanda. Why do oncologists say no to take vitamin C when you're on chemo? Because they don't know anything about nutrition, and it's kind of like, why do dermatologists tell you to avoid sun when sunshine doesn't cause skin cancer? Sunburning causes skin cancer. The two things are very, very different, sunburning and sunshine. Why do oncologists say to avoid vitamin C when you're on chemo? Because they have a fear, an illogical fear, I might add, but a fear that the vitamin C is going to interfere with the poisonous action of the chemotherapeutics. I would say in my opinion, you would support the body with vitamin C if you were choosing to go through chemo and not fear the interference. But again, that's between you and your oncologist. I can't speak for them specifically. Keep scrolling down. Keep going. We're running out of time here. I want to get 1 or 2 more in. What can I use when I am in a migraine and don't want to? Didn't see the question get finished there. Don't want to use. Didn't see the question there. Okay, that's a good one there. Okay, so Deborah, I was diagnosed with celiac in 2016. I've recently been diagnosed with microscopic colitis. I'm ending my second round of steroids because my symptoms came back after the first round. The steroids have been effective when I'm on them. What else would you suggest? Well, the steroids aren't fixing your problem. This is what we call this not green medicine. We just call that medicine, right? Steroids suppress the immune system and stop the inflammation. But what we really want to understand is what's causing the inflammation to occur. With colitis, I can tell you the celiac disease, microscopic colitis, your diet's wrong. And that's why you're having flares, and that's why you're having to go back on the steroids, is your diet is off. You've got to get your diet dialed in. Start with no grain, no pain phase 2. And then, as immediately as you can, work with a functional doctor and get some help. Because navigating that serious condition, without good help is, it's not a good idea. Can foods cause phlegm buildup and coughing? Yes, they can. Actually, one of my only symptoms of gluten exposure for me personally was coughing. I had a chronic cough that went away when I went gluten-free years ago. Okay, guys, it's 23 minutes over the hour, so I tried to get as many answers in for you as I could, but I'm out of time. I got to go home and eat dinner. I've been intermittent fasting myself. So, hey, look, thanks for tuning in and sharing your Monday evening with me. If you're new to the show and you want more, make sure you come visit me, glutenfreesociety.org. Sign up for our newsletter there. You can also tap into our video archives. If you want to learn about specific topics, you can go to the site, you can do a search and tap into our video archive where we've got over 1,000 videos chock full of information to help you navigate this crazy, crazy world that we're living in, and to help you get sanity around your diet, to get sanity around your health, because the way it's done in the mainstream, in my opinion, is insanities, and you want to avoid that. So come back and visit me next Monday night for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Again, thank you so much. Hope you have a great week. Wishing you excellent health. See you next time. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.